Can we all just get along? I hope we can. Well, not at Syracuse University. Syracuse University has permanently expelled its Theta Tau engineering frat and charged 18 members with undisclosed offenses. The university's action comes after a pair of videos surfaced over the weekend in which brothers in the fraternity acted out a number of racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and sexist scenes.
I solemnly swear to always have hatred in my heart for. To always have hatred in my heart for.
To joke that I love black.
The videos initiated in a campus-wide conversation about race and identity at the upstate school, with many minorities students speaking out about feeling unsafe on the mostly white campus. In a lengthy apology on the fraternity's website, the students pled that the videos were meant to be satire and a roast of a conservative brother in the fraternity. The unidentified students have been banned from classes during the disciplinary process. Let's talk about this fraternity's vulgar acts and why it's okay in 2018, and why you're seeing more and more of these tapes. And I'd be remiss, because I think these tapes don't live in isolation. These tapes also live in a world where what we saw this week was police officers brutally arrest, drag, and shame a black woman in a Waffle House to the point where she was left with no shirt on. And I just, you know, America, for all the progress that we have made as a country, it disheartens me that I feel as though we are regressing when it comes to how we treat our neighbors. Let me be very clear on this, because I think this goes both ways. And let me repeat what I just said. For all the progress that we have made as a country, we have regressed on how we treat our neighbors. Racism has never disappeared in this country. I don't care how many laws you pass, right? I don't care how many people who go around and say, I'm not a racist. Racism continues to exist in America. But racism, America, in my opinion, is a symptom of a large disease. And that disease is called hatred. Hatred for the unknown. And that hatred manifests itself in various ways. Via racism, via homophobia, via sexism, via misogyny, via Islamophobia, and on and on and on. And as much as, you know, and don't get me wrong, I think this particular uptick in this level of hatred started far before President Trump was in office. So I'm not going to blame him for starting it, because I think it actually started when Barack Obama was in office. It started when a black family occupied the White House. While our nation made progress and we broke a marble ceiling, many Americans felt that they were on the outlier. Many Americans felt like they didn't understand, or they hated the ideal that a black man occupied the White House. They hated the ideal that women were having their say. They hated the ideal that gay people were allowed to love each other and were allowed to share in a union with each other. They hated these ideals. That we were a nation that indeed, that our First Amendment says freedom of religion, and that's just not for the religion of Christianity, it's for every religion. That means if you're Muslim, if you're Buddhist, if you're atheist, you can come to America and we'll greet you with open arms. And there were groups of people that were afraid of those ideals. And because they were afraid of those ideals, they chose to express themselves in ways of hate. Instead of seeking understanding, instead of trying to figure it out, instead of trying to have a conversation with the other and encounter the other, They chose to hate. And that hate has manifested itself into groups like the alt-right. That hate has manifested itself on our streets when police officers unfairly target black and brown people because of the color of their skin and not the content of their character. That hate manifests itself when the President of the United States stands in front of a group of people and says, when you look at the situation in Charlottesville, where 300 to 500 white men with collared shirts and khakis and tiki torches yelling blood and soil, and says there were good people on many sides. We, as a country, over our many years, have learned to do things better. We haven't gotten it all right. A lot of times we've gotten it wrong. But we've learned to turn the corner. We've learned to turn the tide. We learned to make a difference as a nation. And now it's upon us again to do the same thing. What these frat students in Syracuse University are being blamed for, they're being blamed for, and they suffer from a symptom, like I said, of a large disease, which is hatred and the lack of understanding. When they recorded their tapes, they probably never realized that these satirical tapes would offend others, because the other was never in their mind. You see, when we do something here at the Fowler Show, right, because we are all others at this show, right, and we understand what it is, we bring our full selves to our production. And so when we think about stories, we think about, what would this story offend? How are we going to cover it? How are we going to cover it in the right way? When the Me Too movement started, just give you an example. We here at the Fowler Show wanted to cover it. And we literally had meeting after meeting after meeting to figure out how we cover this story in an authentic way that doesn't take away from the voice of women. Yes, it is true, because I'm a man and I don't have the same agency that a woman does to tell her story in a movement that is uniquely about her. But I am an advocate and I'm an ally. But I am not the right voice, and so we had to figure out how we do it, how we uplift these stories, how we do it in the right way. Same goes for even when we cover a story about race here on this show. Yes, I'm a black man, but my black experience is completely and utterly different from the person that I might be covering. And that all has to be taken into account when we cover these type of stories, because we've got to bring our full selves to the editorial room, but beyond that, we've got to understand the other that we're covering. What has escaped us in this country, especially in the era that we're in today, as we have become a more diverse nation, with more biracial folks, with more interracial couples, we still haven't tackled, we've ignored, not the elephant in the room, but the Mount Everest that exists in the room. And that Mount Everest is this: 400 years of compounded racism and bigotry. And we have got to start to uncompound that racism. Because racism, in my mind, America, it's not like drywall, right, where it's just a slab of wall where you could tear it down. Racism is a brick wall, and you have to tear it down brick by brick by brick. And even when you're done tearing down the walls of racism, you've got to get to the foundation. And the foundation of racism is rooted in hatred. It's rooted in this ideal that I am superior to another group, or what some would call white supremacy. And that white supremacy isn't only a Republican problem. That white supremacy is also a Democratic problem. But what the Syracuse students should teach us all, because this is a teachable moment for everybody watching the show, is that you have got to think about everything you do and the impact that that has on your neighbor. And remember that your neighbor, it doesn't matter who your neighbor is. It doesn't matter their color. It doesn't matter their creed. It doesn't matter their citizenship status or their zip code. We've got to think about our neighbors, and we've got to understand that when we engage in practices that hurt people, they really do hurt people.